Hey, what's going on, guys? Before we jump into the episode here, I just want to remind you to click on the links in the description here or head to my Instagram and the link in my bio. Drop your email into the subscribers list to stay in touch with my newsletter and what I've got going on. Today, we have Matt Presti. Now, Matt Presti was the ex-president of the Walter Russell Museum and the University of Philosophy and Science, which again is all things Walter Russell. When I discovered Walter Russell's work, it really changed my life. And once I integrated a lot of the things that he taught into my daily practices and really solidified them in my mind, it helped me immensely in my life. So I'm really excited to bring this one to you guys. And I think Matt has a lot of interesting things to share. So let's jump right into it. Okay, welcome back everyone to Dig Within. I am Rob Edward, and today I'm really excited to bring you my guest. He is the ex-president of the University of Philosophy and Science. I first heard of this gentleman here, Matt Presti, when he was on the Crow 777 podcast, and it was really the first time I'd ever heard the name Walter Russell, but immediately I completely connected with what you were sharing about his life, his teachings, and his cosmogony. And I immediately ordered the Universal One from the University of Philosophy and Science. And then I opened the first couple pages, and when I kind of need a reference point for some of this language and all that kind of stuff, not that it's inaccessible, it's just a completely new framework to work within. So then I went in and I ordered the home study course, and I've completely sort of changed my entire outlook on life and looking at the world around me. And I just really want to thank you, just off the hop here, for getting Walter Russell's cosmogony out to more people, as it really clearly defined and really proved to me the God model for which I can actually understand and explain now that I have a provable model to work within, which I think is what his model is. So welcome to the show, Matt. And I just was wondering if you could maybe share a bit of your background, how you found out about Walter Russell's work yourself, and maybe explain to people who don't know who he is and why his work is so important to understand.
Well, thanks for the introduction and the welcome, Rob. Enjoyed taking part in podcasts, and glad to hear you got the home study course. That's a fantastic thing to get into for $250. You can't beat it. People spend $40,000 and go into debt for 30 years for a worthless college education that still leaves them wanting for answers. I shouldn't say worthless, that's a little harsh, but yeah, let's just say it. A lot of our student body comes from academia, and their number one complaint was that they wanted the information that the University of Science and Philosophy, Walter and Leo Russell, gave to the world. They wanted that in academia. That's what they wanted to get, was answers to the great existential questions. Why am I? Who am I, and why am I here? Kind of things like that. The great philosophers have asked from time immemorial. But yeah, I got into Walter Russell really heavily back in 2008. I'm reading The Secret of Light, life-changing work. As a musician, it just clicked, made absolute sense to me. And I would go on to produce the Secret of Light series, which is a 19-part series on the science and philosophy of Dr. Russell, explained using pictures and videos and underlying wordage under that, just to get people to have a greater understanding of it. And also Knowing the Creator 101 is a YouTube series I did, 4 parts that go more into what the creator is and the process of creation. So I have not come to embrace anything such as Walter's teachings that has been quite as life-changing as these. Just something about them clicked for me, and ever since I've just been honored to share my perspectives on it. And it led me to a position with the University of Science and Philosophy as its president, which I did step down this August 10th of 2021. John Bonsall, my replacement, who I picked, was approved by the board and took over. And the work is still going out. It's exciting to see things multiplying and more people coming to it. And I thank you again.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when you start to unravel it, it's really puzzling as to why we aren't taught about this before. And I was wondering, because doing his research, his genius is really compared to his close friends, such as Nikola Tesla, and he's also compared to Einstein and other people of that caliber. And I believe there's a story that when he wrote the Universal One, he gave it to Nikola Tesla, and he essentially said something like, "You might have to lock this up for 100 years before people can really start to grasp it or explain it." And I was wondering, if you could maybe unravel some of what Walter's work is, how he came to know what he was, I guess, illuminated by, and why potentially you think we haven't likely heard of Walter.
It's a lot for the same reasons. You haven't heard much of Nikola Tesla, who did invent the radio, by the way, the radio transmitter. It was not Marconi. And you hear names like Einstein, but you don't often hear people saying Einstein was wrong. Walter was one of the few who did. He said Einstein, his E equals MC squared was only half right. It wasn't fully true to nature. And that book, Universal One, which got out to 800 scientists in 200 of the top universities in the world, was sent out to give the illuminating knowledge that Dr. Russell had acquired in a 39-day illumination in 1921. Illumination is the acquisition of knowledge without learning. You come to know things. It's represented by the light bulb over the head, right? We've all had ideas that come to us out of nowhere that we did not, there's no knowledge in a library. There's what the knowledge is in you. Reading the words awakens you to it. Okay, so what we got to do is redefine knowledge as not being words themselves. Therefore, it's not in libraries. What you're reading are impressions by an author who then is illuminating your mind using words, which are just symbols. They have absolutely no meaning other than when they're taken into the mind, which is that field, which is omnipresent, which is also what the creator happens to be. And so when Dr. Russell experienced this illuminating effect in the field, he was one with the field, you could say, which is like being one with you being a drop of consciousness in an ocean of consciousness. So that was where he acquired his illuminating new knowledge, which became the foundation of a new science, which he was commanded to give to the world. Many people have had illuminations throughout history. Joan of Arc, you can name a great many people. Some 40 who Richard Morris Buck wrote Cosmic Consciousness, which was a work authored in the year 1901 and released to the world, which basically contained study and research about who he believed to be the 40 greatest illuminates ever to walk among mankind. Walter Russell was not one of them because he was not yet to that point of being well known, but ultimately he would become one who did give this knowledge from that experience of illumination out to the world. That's why Nikola Tesla advised him to lock his work up for 1,000 years in a sepulcher, because mankind was not unfolded enough to even begin to understand it. So, but that knowledge was encompassed in the teachings of the University of Science and Philosophy, which people can find at philosophy.org/store. A lot of great work on there, timeless.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where I went to grab both of those books. And I would highly recommend both, definitely. But the home study course, to kind of, if you have no previous background in any of these kind of things, like I didn't pay attention at all to science, chemistry, anything like that in school. And I think based on the model of which it's taught, that's probably more of what my resistance to it was than the actual teachings itself, because the way that it's explained in these teachings is so much more accessible. But again, it's grounded in the idea that there is sense to this place. It's not something that is just a random occurrence, and there's some kind of laws that maybe make sense at some points. It's more, these are the laws, they are immutable. There's no other way that I guess where we are works outside of these laws. These are the kind of way that it operates. But I feel like this is kind of a question that I've asked a couple guests now, because I feel like it's a huge thing that a lot of people struggle with. And I'm wondering if a lot of people struggle with their connection to a higher power, and especially a concept of God, because of all the indoctrination through religion and trauma. And I'm wondering if you could explain maybe that word, or concept of God, what it maybe means to you, or what it means to in Russell's cosmogony. You know, what is it that that word actually means when we try to strip away all of the baggage that is associated with it?
Well, it's a great question. The creator is the undivided. The Russells defined it very well in Atomic Suicide on page 107. In fact, there's been no chapter I've ever encountered in any book anywhere on the planet that I've read or have even heard of where God was sufficiently defined. And that's actually the name of the chapter on page 107, Atomic Suicide. We define God. And you would almost think that was, you know, are they really joking? Is this a joke? Or are they actually going to define God? So they called it the motionless, the invisible, the white, static, undivided, sexless, dimensionless light of mind, which is present and omnipotent. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's really an incredible definition because it's a divine scientific principle, which really has a living philosophy behind it as opposed to dead philosophies. And to be quite honest, it's so far ahead of its time, which is why you get these warnings from people like Nikola Tesla to lock it away, because until man can really come to know what let's just say stillness, for instance. When we open a door, we see the door open and close, right? That's duality. But how many people notice what doesn't move when you open and close a door, which is the door jamb, right? Nobody notices that. They see the tire moving, but they don't know that it's, you know, the hub of the wheel, that, you know, the axle that doesn't move, that's locked firmly to the car. And in yourself is a center point. You know, we open, we close, we lift our arms up and down. There's seemingly duality everywhere, but it's typically provable if you take a piece of green magnetic paper and you hold it over a magnet, you will see the white light between the North and South poles. That's scientific evidence of this creator, exactly as Walter and Leo Russell described it. It's the fulcrum, as Dr. Russell said, that which doesn't move, much like a seesaw, right? You have a seesaw that moves on a fulcrum that does not move. Well, the power is not in the lever, as these teachings so wonderfully let be known. The power is in that which doesn't move. And that's really the crux of the whole situation. Why man doesn't see the fulcrum in things is because he believes in duality as absolute. And because he's in a world of opposites, a world of lefts and rights, ups and downs, forwards and backwards, ins and outs, you know, heats and colds and full and empty. But ultimately, when you develop what I call triality, the awareness of three and one centering every two, you could say, which still adds up to three, then you begin to identify where you can locate the creator. And much like the same with an Earth, you know, or with a planetary body, you have a north and south pole. Even your own body itself is a left and right hemisphere centered by an immovable static, which never moves, but your body moves upon it. And that's also centers the DNA strands of the 570 trillion strands that fire, or I'm sorry, the trillions of strands that fire 570 trillion times a second to create the visible form of a human body. And any other forms for that matter. You have cellular structures that vibrate at certain intensities and frequencies, all of which produce the seeming reality of solidity. But again, in every center of every cell, and in every center of every DNA strand, in the center of every body of motion between the north and south poles of every spheroid, be it whatever, is an immovable stillness, a center, a zero of stillness. And that is where the creator is located. And so it's always at 90 degrees to motion, which is here. That's why we never notice it. We're looking out in the one, you know, diametrically opposed to the stillness. We're only seeing that which moves and which reflects vibrations to our vibrating senses. We can't see stillness, we can't hear silence, but we can know it. And see, therein lies, that's when you take from the senses and turn it 90 degrees, you start to realize that, hey, there's this missing third strand of what man can only call the creator, or the field of mind, or the field of consciousness, but it's omnipresent, it's in and out and throughout the universe. There's only one moment. It happens everywhere simultaneously at the precise same exact moment. And you start to really understand what the concept of true being is. It's that knowing which supersedes sensing.
Yeah, I was reviewing some of this to prepare for our discussion today, and that was one of the things that jumped out as me as well. The idea that you can't know. I think his analogy was to a sunset. You can't know a sunset because you can understand its effects on the sky, but the knowing isn't in that perception of what you're seeing. The cause is something that you can know, but that's not an accumulation of information. It's a knowing. It's a sensory kind of intuition, I guess you can maybe relate that to. And I've heard you use that word travaide a couple times in your speeches, which I think is great, because it's the idea that we're seeing trying to be explained in all of the great religions too, right? They all center around essentially three major forces centered around the one, which would be the all, or the all father, or whatever, right? You have Odin, Thor, and Loki. You have, and again, you have the Trinity of Christianity. You have all these things, but it's all centered around that one, essentially all powerful force, which I was curious because I was extremely interested in the Kabbalion and the seven Hermetic principles, I think, as I was reading it, or maybe a bit before. And it seemed like they really kind of fit in there. And I was wondering if you have is there a correlation between that, the first Hermetic principle of mentalism, and that the all is mind? Is that similar to, can you use that kind of framework into understanding Russell's God model? And I think you mentioned before that the idea of the all is mind, and that the idea that is every idea that you think of, it has to be first generated in your mind to then bring it into physical existence. And that's how we are able to manifest on our plane. And you've related sometimes in that kind of regard that nature is God's thinking. And I wonder if you can maybe unpack that a little bit. And again, if there's a correlation between the all principle and Russell's God model.
Yeah, the Kabbalion was written by the three initiates, which a lot of different researchers have pointed to that's probably Masonic origins around the time of the period of time it was written. But basically, it's Hermeticism repackaged. The great Hermetic teachings, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. You could go back and find earlier renditions of this that were prior to this prepackaging, but the only part of that, the seven principles that they define, that I would disagree with, is that God vibrates at a very high vibrational rate.
Yes, I've heard you say that before.
Which
Yeah.
I took that apart in Knowing the Creator 101, episode 2, and for good reason, because the New Age movement is rife with references to raising your vibrations. And I'll just give you an example. If you think an earthquake is something to strive to become, look at what damage an earthquake can do. A riot is similar to an earthquake, only it's human form versus tectonic plates. Is that productive? Is that super high spirituality where people are rioting and burning cities down? Of course not. Is a fever a high vibrational state? Yes, it is. So why strive to get a fever and then radioactively expire at death because you burned yourself to death with a high rate of vibration? So the whole idea of a high vibration to achieve godliness or higher spiritual values, or a life path or emanation of your own bodily form by vibrating at a high frequency it's something that should be tossed out the window, because it's in no way, shape, or form true. If you're going to achieve a higher spiritual state of evolution or being, if you will, then you need to lower your vibration to become still on the inside. And it's in that stillness that you can hear your still small voice, right? It doesn't say your high vibrating voice. You know, angry people yelling and screaming at each other are high vibrating voices. Basically, what I was saying is that this idea, this notion that the New Age movement puts forth of raising our vibrations is antithetical to true spiritual teachings, which you can find by the great minds like Meister Eckhart, Lao Tzu, Gopi Krishna, Walter Russell. There's many you could read from that talk about stillness and silence as the abode of the creator. And the reason that is because, again, it's 90 degrees to motion and senses, which is here's your motion, here's your senses, you know, your left, right eye. Your body is literally a mirror, you know, and nature is a mirror of God's thinking. It is not the creator, it's the mirror of the thinking projected onto the screen of space in divided sequences of light. And these are true divisions of light that are scientifically provable by, again, taking a piece of green magnetic paper and holding it over a magnet, and you will see the north and the south hemisphere with a white light between the two. That is an absolute provable piece of evidence that that white light is the creator, or you could call it consciousness, you could call it mind, you could call it the real power, our power itself, true power. There's a lot of words you could use for it, but the point of that is that it's not responsive to our senses, but all things unfold from that, and it is completely still. And one of my favorite quotes, again, from the Russells is, there are no vibrations to the spirit whatsoever. Absolutely no vibrations to the spirit whatsoever. And so this idea in Hermeticism that we need to go to this high vibration to attain a higher spiritual mastery is ludicrous. I would thoroughly disagree with that notion, being that you know, anything in a high vibration is in a state of rapid declination.
Yeah, it seems with most of these things that there's a bunch of kernels of truth, and then one or two things just to get you slightly off center, so you're not gathering all the information that you need, right? I was curious.
Correct.
With that, and the idea that the omnipresentness of this God model, what then is the role of evil in the world? I feel that it's a difficult one to kind of contend with when you have certain religions that talk about a deity or something like that you can attach that to. But if God is all and it is the omnipresence, then in your opinion, or if there is anything in these teachings of Walter Russell, the role of evil, or that, I guess, idea of duality of choice between, you know, those two ultimate kind of human fundamental choices that we have, how does that kind of work with this idea that, because you always hear those accusations hurled at people that are talking about the things that we're talking about, well then how do you make up for, you know, children and dire straits and all these different catastrophes and stuff like that? What would your response be to those kind of things?
Well, my response would be, is there evil in nature? And believe me, I've looked for years. I spent searching to find evil in nature, and all I found was God instead, which is balance. And if balance is the condition of nature, the natural condition, which is the creator's thinking expressed on the screen of space, then what is man's thinking that is unbalanced? What is that? And what is its cause? What is the cause of unbalance would be the question, which really, if you want to get down to it, unbalance equals evil, because people that are balanced don't do unbalanced things. If they do, they immediately know it, and they either cease or void the unbalance immediately, because the effects of all unbalances are generally what we call negative or evil. So ultimately, one has to conclude by the study of such questions that evil is a state of unbalance. What is its cause? What's the one thing that we have that nature doesn't? Free will. So there's your cause of evil. If free will was taken away, like it is for the animal kingdom, which operates on instinct, we would see no more wars. We would see no more hunger, because nature would eliminate all that is purposeless overnight, more than likely, or within at least a few weeks. And that's really, again, more evidence. You could say that, nature doesn't nature doesn't let things get out of balance, and if they are out of balance, it's not for very long. Like a rock ledge that's about to break off into the ocean, it quickly finds rest at the bottom of the ocean once it breaks off. But it's not evil because it breaks off and causes a tidal wave that floods a village out. It was man's free will that he chose to stay at that site, which lava flowed onto. Okay, it wasn't an evil god or an evil deity. It was a bad choice, an unbalanced choice, which resulted in that. If a busload of kids goes off a cliff in a school bus, a lot of people, especially in the religious denominations, will go, "Oh, God took them." No, the mechanic at the brake shop who didn't fix the brakes right, that's who you blame for that, not the creator. Okay, the creator is simply balancing an unequal, unbalanced action with the balanced one, which resulted in what would be considered a tragedy. But again, free will is the main culprit missing from all these dialogues. Nobody wants to discuss that. And if we really lived in a deterministic universe, then we would be instinct controlled, because instinct is true determinism. It's already determined. There's only so many things an owl's going to do when it confronts a mouse flying in the night. Okay. So ultimately, what one has to ask is, what is the difference between instinct control, which is God control, and free will? Free will is a release from God control, which results in unbalanced acts being capable, which are what we call evil. That'd be how I would answer that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, even in the atheistic communities too, there's the argument that we don't actually have free will, which I think on its face is just the most ridiculous argument that you could possibly posit. But
right, because you have to have the free will to make that choice to think there's no free will.
Mm-hmm.
So that invalidates their entire argument right from the get-go.
Right. And you have people, I think a major one really is Sam Harris. And again, you have the idea that he's written multiple books, and you kind of go, how did you write those? Right. Yeah. It constantly is reminding me that, especially with what we're seeing happen in the world today, when we're trying to track back the initiating cause of the reason why we're in where we're in right now, especially what we're finding out about germ versus terrain theory. And we're trying to find, basically, we're always trying to look at the effects and try to get rid of the effects, but we're never going back to the cause.
Yeah. When you don't consider cause, then you're left with a world of effects. And you're trying to always figure out from an effectual point of view, what is the cause of the, it's hard to figure out what an effect is by using an effect to explain the effect. It doesn't amount to an equal ratio. In other words, you're always left with a deficit. And that's why there's so many anomalies in science. And who is it that said an anomaly is what you have left over when you apply a bad theory? There's so many anomalies in our current scientific paradigms that, if you just look at just the whole the CV-19, let's just say, and the fact that, there's so much that could be being done to thwart this disease in much better ways and fashions than is being currently practiced, that it makes you wonder, what are these people smoking? Of course, we know there's a lot more to it. There's a lot deeper things going on here, but ultimately the causes of things are often overlooked, because cause is only something that can be known. It can't be sensed. And again, if you're operating from a horizontal awareness, which is through your senses alone, then you're never going to come to knowing, which is at 90 degrees to that motion. And again, you have to be able to have that ability to think vertically, or to the better word is to achieve vertical awareness, to look at things as they are, and all that motion aside.
Yes. And I think it's very interesting that you have to kind of give every single allowance to the other side's argument, of which they can then base everything off of, but it's all based on effect and not looking at a cause. take, for example, obviously the Big Bang and everything, right? We'll explain everything after everything is set into motion, right? Or even there's tons of, issues and problems with the evolutionary model and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's an outdated model that has never been proven, and more it's
Right.
kind of exposed that it's not really the legitimate kind of, I guess, way that things kind of operate. And
Right.
yeah, I was wondering, because on that, it's kind of interesting. I was wondering if maybe we can dive into a bit more of his work specifically. And again, this is kind of more difficult things for me to understand because I don't have a background in this, but the work that he had with finding new elements and he was effectively able to find certain periodic elements on these tables, but using his spiral model of cause as opposed to effect. And I know there was a story of him creating elements by using his knowledge in alchemy and actually transmuting some actual physical substances. And I was wondering if maybe you can expand on those ideas.
Yeah, that took place at Westinghouse Labs. He was offered a laboratory to work in, and he transmuted water into several different elements, nitrogen being the primary one, 17 different times in front of these Westinghouse scientists. And several of the times that he did it, he was using one type of enclosure. And then they said, well, that must be contaminated. We want you to use, quartz now. And so he would switch, and then he'd do it 5, 6 more times. And then they went, wait, this can't be possible. There must be something contaminating it. Let's switch to this. And finally, after 17 times, he just said, look, I'm not going to waste my time anymore. You guys are your own worst obstacle. You refuse to see what the truth of the situation is, that transmutation through the use of electrical stimulation is a very real possibility, and very real itself. And I mean, it's to say that, if you just look at what the human body can do, the human body is a transmutation device, and we're transmuting food into incredible things that the body is able to use to rebuild cells, and then taking the dead cells and excreting them out in different ways. You lose 2 pounds of death out of your body every day on average. And yet that's not what it looked like when it came in, you see. So right there, the human body itself, it's everything you want to know about the universe. If you can come to know the human body for its symmetry, for the still light between the hemispheres, much like a magnetic field, like the green paper proves that the creator exists without a doubt, or that field of consciousness is at 90 degrees to all polarized divisions, which are perfect mirrored hemispheres. Look at this. Proof of symmetry. There it is. It's right here. This body, your own physical body, is a great place to start. And you even breathe in and you breathe out. And when you take a deep breath, you have to stop because you hit 90 degrees, and you have to reverse the out breath motion of exhalation, where you then again, guess what? You hit the wall of 90 degrees, and you have to what? You have to reverse direction. So that's why we call him Dr. Russell, was able to, I think he knew the human body well enough too, that he could see that, all these reversals of polarity and these reversing interchanges, that helped him to, divine the idea of rhythmic balanced interchange. And he said, if there's one law in the universe, and the only law that you need to know as a human being, then let this be the one law: balance. If you need 2 words, rhythmic balanced. If you need 3 words, let it be rhythmic balanced interchange. And that will pretty much explain the entire universe to you.
Yeah, and I was wondering maybe if you could unpack a little bit of his background and his life, and the fact that he was not really formally trained in any sort of, I guess, sense that we care about nowadays for some weird reason still. But most of his things came from that illumination, and I would say nowadays, like downloads or whatever. But some of the feats that he was able to accomplish just by using this power that he was understanding being unfolded with some of his sculptures and his work in the architecture field and stuff like that. And I was wondering if you could maybe sort of unpack that for some of our audience too.
Sure. Well, he was able to live 5 lifetimes in one. He was called the modern Leonardo da Vinci, or the most versatile man in America. He was known as a artist who mastered all 5 of the fine arts, and that only having completed a 4th grade education. When he dropped out in the 4th grade, was able to completely master the 5 fine arts. And he was conferred 11 degrees, including Doctor of Science. And he did discover, he did predict heavy water. He did discover 4 elements that others eventually got Nobel Prizes for, the radioactive elements. And so, just a living example, he produced, well, I moved his personal collection of art and belongings, 64 tons of it, into this new museum in Waynesboro, Virginia. And again, you can find information on that at philosophy.org. It's really an incredible legacy that he left for us. And when you move that much stuff for somebody, you realize, yeah, this is a real legacy. This is not just, somebody's, oh, here's a philosophy, or here's a course in miracles or something with no physical evidence to prove it. He had physical evidence to prove it. And he often said of his artwork that that's the living demonstration that my philosophy works, because there's the evidence in 64 tons of art and sculpture. And so anyways, and that was only yet 2% of the entire work he did in his life. The rest is out there in the world somewhere. So he was prolific, and he often would say that genius, the characteristic defining differences between mediocrity and genius are detailed in the book, The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. And one in particular was that genius produces a prodigious amount of work. And so you'll always know a genius because he leaves a trail of work behind him that's enormous. Okay, so you want to look at the differences between why some people produce more and why others live mediocre lives. It would tend to come down to the recognition of the creative light within them, and how much do they utilize and use and become enthused by that light. I like to say that we have 3 main challenges in life: to access the light, to hold it, number 2, but beyond all, to express it. And we all have this light of knowledge of consciousness in us. We are a drop in the ocean of consciousness, but inside of us is the entire ocean. And so if we can access it, and all the power's there, it's based on desire is your volume knob. Some people turn their desire up to 2, and that's where they set up their tent, and that's good enough for them. But they don't produce anything. They end up retiring from a job after 50 years, have the wife and kids and the grandkids and the whole 9 yards. And then there's other men who turn theirs up to 10, and they make televisions, and they invent, AC electricity, or they produce, 100 plus tons of art and sculpture, and they become remembered and well known because of what they produced. That's I guess a demarcation line between mediocrity and genius is, again, it comes down to production. But he would go on to just demonstrate that in life, and that was his philosophy. He backed it up by physical evidence and hard work. And really, hard work is if anybody wants to succeed at life in anything, creative or otherwise, it takes hard work. So I think he was the living demonstration of that. And his illuminations, he would have one every 7 years, a major one, but every year around his birthday in May, he would have minor illuminations. But he was prepared, he said, every 7 years until his 49th year, when he got the big illumination, which was 39 days that he spent in the light. He sought the refuge of his quarters and didn't come out for quite a while, drew hundreds of charts and drawings and graphs, and wrote 39,000 words, which became known as the Message of the Divine Iliad. And that's a profound piece of literature. He outwitted Walt Whitman, some of his colleagues said in his writings. But that was the major illumination that would ultimately give birth to the science that he called the new science of tomorrow.
That's what I find so incredible, is that his name is related to these people such as Tesla, such as Einstein, such as Walt Whitman. And for me, and I would imagine a lot of people listening too, have never heard this guy's name, right? And it's just incredible that that's the case. And it reminds me a lot of Rudolf Steiner's work, where if you trace back how much work he actually produced, it was something like writing 50 pages a day for his entire life. And that's just a work that we can't even comprehend in today's society. You know, it's incredible. And I was wondering, you mentioned there about how much you choose to turn up that desire of accessing the light or accessing these ideas, and what would be some things that people can do in order to kind of tap that in, or to understand that this potential is within them? How does someone unlock that?
Well, again, if life is a mirror, what you take in, if you're watching TV and expect to get inspiration from it, you're kidding yourself. So, it depends on what you're watching, of course. Try to find things that inspire you, music that inspires you. Um, Above all, my top recommendation is go out in nature, take a walk in nature, because then you're going to see what you're taking into your eyes is mirroring into your visual cortex, which becomes the world that you see. You're not seeing anything with your eyes. It's all, we were talking earlier before the show, it's you see black and white and upside down until the visual cortex, through the cones of the eye, flip the image right side up, three-dimensionalize it, and project that into your visual cortex with color. So where is the world taking place? Out here or in your mind? And that's why, again, scientifically speaking, it's provable that the universe is not outside of you, it's within, because that's where you're seeing it, all of it. And so when you let the mirror image that reverberates in your visual cortex be nature, then like nature, that's what you become. So really, we are what we eat, we are what we pay attention to, we are what we see, we are what we do. And really, that's, you want to make a change in life, try doing something different. Try turning the TV off for a while, go out in nature, and speak to the creator inside you, and the creator will speak to you. And the voice of the creator is what they call the voice of conscience, or the still small voice. It's just, I think we used to hear it a lot louder back in the ancient days, if you will. And with all the technology and, a lot of this, people walking down the street, da, 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 they're not even looking where they're going. They're completely out of focus with even their own intentions, and we need to really, if you're going to find inspiration, you have to find it in the places that are the natural places of the world. Because that's, again, you're taking in the thinking of the creator, which is this balanced consciousness that has absolute autonomy. It is sovereign, and it has continuity, unlike man's civilizations, which 29 have risen and fallen. And I'm not going to put this one past falling too, but one thing that never falls is nature, and it's always continuous. It's got continuity for the main reason because it has balance. And when you gaze at that balance becomes you. And that's where you can learn to listen to that still small voice with more great detail.
Yeah, I think that's, again, the idea. We're seeing this in medicine and stuff like that as well too, where you can physically make yourself sick through your thoughts as well. So if you were to, again, transmute that in the polarity scheme to something greater, then you can really see how taking control of your mind and really paying attention to your thoughts and what you want to create is exactly how you create. And that was one of the things that in the home study course was huge for me. And it's the two first books, I guess, which is meditation scientifically explained and prayer scientifically explained. And something huge clicked within me with reading that was, previously, it's a difficult thing that we're dealing with nowadays, because there's so much, again, trauma, indoctrination, and so much baggage around these words that we're using, right? Like God and like creator and stuff like that, where it was always this externalization of, there's something outside. It's not a part of you. It's this all omnipresent being that's in everything else aside from you, right? And it was a huge shift in my conceptualization when I started to actually use that and go, okay, now when I'm going to go into this, I'm going to speak to myself. I'm going to try to find that voice within myself. And again, because I've heard your your explanations of this. And I really, really appreciate the work that you're doing in that regard, because it was going away from the vibration of let's raise things up, as opposed to no, go still and try to find that stillness so that you can hear it within the silence, as opposed to creating more noise. And it was essentially, once I made that click, now every time that it's like there was a concept that, again, we're constantly looking outside of ourselves to God, that we are a part of nature, but the only part really that matters, which are our connection to our creator, we're not a part of that. God's not within that. And it was kind of one of those things that Walter constantly says too, that man has all knowledge within himself. And I feel like it's within that framework, right? That there's no barrier between you and your connection with that. And actually, when you tap into that, that's how you're using that power to create in the physical plane. So wondering if there's anything in there, or if I'm kind of on the right track with this sort of, because it's still new to me too. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, you nailed it. I mean, it is within you, and that's anything that brings a middleman between you and your own consciousness, which the creator is. Again, let me share screen real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I might have to have you enable that, but while you're doing that, basically there's a great graphic that I'll show you, but ultimately, there's so many words that are synonymous for the word God that I think if you might have to, again, enable me as a co-host, I think is the thing to do with there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. And here we go. So if you can see that, then
yep.
You see the equator in the body of the man. I've shown that as being the still white light between your two hemispheres. So I thought the cross graphic, which is actually a three-dimensional cube unfolded, would be a great way to list the synonymous words. And this is what you're going to find in the Russell teachings. This is a really key, I'd call it a Rosetta Stone to understanding the Russell teachings on a fuller and greater level. Is that equator is, again, the vertical of the cross there. You'll see the zero, God, creator, oneness, mind, idea, life, love, spirit, soul, truth, et cetera, all the way down. Those are all synonymous words. They all mean the same thing. You're speaking about the power that is central to all motion, that centers all motion, that centers all divided motions, that is the fulcrum upon which all motion moves, which is 90 degrees to all motion. And then you can see the horizontal awareness, which is sensation, which is the seesaw. And unfortunately, a lot of human beings like to ride that seesaw, and they never come in their lifetime to really become aware of the vertical awareness, or the Godhead, as it's labeled there. And even in the equators between planets, you have polarized conditions, which is really that vertical awareness dividing itself into 90-degree interchanged rhythmic balanced motions, which are what create the motion dynamic universe of seeming dualistic opposition. So that's really, that's a great graphic. And that's something I developed using a couple of the images. The spheroid and the man image was from Dr. Russell's work, but the cross was my idea, just to put all that in and then show how the arms of the cross are where most people's focus is. And they are always, science is even out there. Materialist science is out on the arms, trying to explain the motion, using motion to explain motion. And that's why they're looking for a Big Bang particle called the God particle, which carbon is the actual God particle, not this invisible radioactive element that they're seeing appear for a billionth of a second after ramming two particles together at near light speed. It's to me, that just shows how far off they are from actual reality. You remove mind from matter and you get what you get with materialist science. And that's why they can say things like, follow the science, right? I mean, how many times have we heard that in the past year and a half, until it's so ad nauseum that it's like eating vomit. If you believe it, you're eating vomit, and you're supposed to be okay with that. I've been calling science out for a couple decades now, and I'm glad I have, because when this whole sham of the pandemic came along, I instantly knew that it was a, it was a ruse. It was a Trojan horse for greater things. But ultimately, what you're going to find when you remove mind from explanations of the universe is you're going to come away with a causeless universe, and you're going to have effect explaining effect ad nauseum, again and again and again, until you're so wrapped up in the multiplicity of effects that it's like trying to explain the universe with a Rubik's cube wrapped in an enigma wrapped in a Rubik's cube. You're never going to come close. You're always going to miss the home mark. So again, I think that's more or less a difference between the materialist philosophy and the philosophy of idealism, which connotes consciousness as cause, for lack of a better basic interpretation, where materialism says effect causes mind. So which one do you want to try to unpack the universe with? It's your choice ultimately, as free will is the reigning champion of humanity. But ultimately, I find people who have tried to explain this universe do better when they put mind as its source. And because everything is provable, that mind is causal. And the exhibit A I will offer is anything man-made. I mean, anything man-made, and I've said this in a lot of interviews, that in order for it to be made, it must first be a thought in the mind of that man. And then his challenge therein is to build a body for it. So a body is really a representation of the idea or the thought. And building the body is crystallizing that thought into matter, which proves that mind exists as the cause.
And I was wondering, as you were explaining that, for me, when I hear that, I hear when people don't want to even entertain this idea, is that it really confronts someone with the idea that there is a method to this, or that there is some sort of, I guess, system of which they have to work within, as opposed to we can create our own systems and then we can do whatever we want, as opposed to we must work with certain parameters. We must have a sort of fence post to work within, and then we can create something beautiful. It's like composing anything or being creative in any sort of way. You can't just create. You need to have some sort of thing that you're going to, the framework that you're going to work within. You being a musician too, you obviously know this as well. It's not something that you can just have free reign to do whatever you want. You need to have some sort of framework to work within. And I'm curious if you have any ideas on that, in terms of the fact that people don't want to, I guess, look into this because it would confront them with the fact that there are immutable laws and ways that you have to work within this. And what would that mean for your entire life, and doing potentially just whatever you want, whenever you want, which we're sold to now. That's what's going to make you happy, when we're kind of seeing the effects of that cause right now.
Right. Well, Leo Russell would say there's two kinds of people: those who live a purposeless life and those of a purposeful life. And that's what we're missing in society today, is purpose. And again, call it the New World Order, call it the Great Reset, whatever you want to call it. But the architects of this demonic, unbalanced, which is evil, right, construction, are using the same techniques to create this body that they want, that the great masters of time immemorial have used to create the greatest works of art and music and poetry ever known to man. It's the same process of creation. And you can look at it in many different ways, but ultimately, when people don't have purpose, they tend to get on board other people's purposes. Okay, if you don't have the creative gift to create a company, then you're probably likely to go work for somebody else's company and their mental creation of what they, a lot of companies that are behind this great set, their own corporations, if you will, that are trying to make this great reset a reality. Many of them did not start out at intent. They were bought up, they were consolidated, they were joined together for the purpose of creating this new world order. And anyways, then you still have, when the fist squeezes the clay inevitably comes out of the fingers. And as much as the Great Reset might be something for people to worry about. People have to remember that if you're out of those fingers and you're no longer in the grip of the fist, then you are free to keep creating. And as much as they have the law of creation for their own benefit, so do we. You know, as much psychology that they've collected on us, we can also collect psychology on them. And because Michael Tessarian said, "How are you going to hunt the long tiger in the grass if you don't think like the the tiger in the long grass?" Right. So when you understand how these people think and how they use the same laws of creation that great masters do. And again, I guess that's the difference between good and evil, is that one is for the greater good of humanity and one is for really humanity's destruction in the end. But it's, again, it all comes down to balance and unbalance. That which is balanced is purposeful, that which is unbalanced is purposeless. And nature removes all things that are purposeless. It just does. That's why you don't see unbalance in nature. So ultimately, you know, this isn't going to end well, but what comes out of the fingers, the creative powers that men and women have access to at this point in time, which is unique, is beyond measure. And we are at one of the greatest pivotal moments in the history of humanity. And we have a real chance to take back the flame of creativity, to learn to listen to that still small voice and to guide our destinies as we see fit.
I think it's incredible too, the sort of similarities that I've been having in my thinking, and I guess would be my meditations with God too, is the balance between, again, stalking that tiger in the grass, as it were, understanding what's coming and paying attention to, I guess, what the plans are laid out, which again are completely out there and they're just being very upfront about it. But then also not falling into just playing into their framework of pulling your attention and your intuition and all of your creative faculties to just focus on what they're kind of doing. In terms of, if you know that all of this is malarkey, it's not really what they're telling you. Each time you go in and you tap into on your phone or whatever kind of device you have to connect with the world, you're just seeing the next thing, the next thing, the next crazy thing that they're kind of putting out, and this, that, and the other thing. If you know that it's palpably false, then you're also just directing your attention to not only, you could liken it to say, well, I'm still stalking the tiger, but you're not really, because you're not doing anything of which you're going to then hunt, or you're going to be creative to kind of get out of the model of the analogy you had there. And I was just wondering if you could maybe unpack that a bit in terms of getting your intention correct on what you want to create, as opposed to constantly just fighting what's coming or getting stuck in that repeating pattern of, I need to keep up with what's going on or what they're planning next, when it's like you already kind of know that. You're just not taking any sort of steps in creating what you want to bring forth into this world, creating those bodies, as you were saying.
Yeah, that's a good point to make, because you know, you could be an expert at what these people are doing, what they're up to, but if that's all you're an expert at, then are you really living a purposeful life? I mean, what about being an expert of yourself, of your own creativity, of your own desires, your own purpose for being? I mean, we can watch and follow these people every day of our lives, but it's good to know your enemy. In no way, shape, or form am I saying it's not. But what I am saying is that, to echo what you're just saying, there is, knowing your enemy without knowing yourself is just as weak a position as not knowing your enemy at all.
Mm.
I think Sun Tzu has something in his Art of War similar to that. But ultimately, you know, it reminds me of, you know, if you're just following these folks and what they're doing, being on top of it and trying to you know, alert everybody to what's going on without a creative bone in your body, then you're just like the man who reads the newspapers every day, and at the end of his life he knows nothing. You know, I think it was Mark Twain that said that a man can read the newspapers all his life. At the end of his life, he's asked, what does he know? And the answer is nothing. Right? So ultimately, your own creative desires need to be inculcated, need to be watered and adopt it as a life path for yourself in some percentage. You have to have some form of creativity as a creative being. And I think the number one similarity between all the world religions and all the great philosophies that has been boiled down to one sentence would be manifest your creator. And if you are the creator to the degree that you realize you're a piece of the creator, manifest it, whatever that is. It could be, there's a myriad of different things a person can do with their time and their energy, but just manifest a little bit of it and watch how it blossoms, And in that, I think, is one of our greatest defenses against this reset. Because what are they resetting to? They're resetting human growth to a previous level before it can grow out of their control. And that's really what it's about, is controlling the human mind and the human race. That's where, mind control, its root is in control itself. But control is really the greatest of all illusions, because the only way these people can achieve what they want to do through their unbalanced, purposeless agenda is for us to give control of our own thinking and thoughts and mind processes over to them. Where there is a mind that thinks for itself, it cannot be controlled by anybody or anything. So ultimately, the more people that can manifest and realize that central core of their power within themselves, necessity is the father of all invention. And there are a lot of things being necessitated for our survival right now. We're going to have to learn to grow food. So what are we seeing more of? More grow towers. Research grow towers, people. I mean, you could grow your own food for 16 people for about $400 or $500 that you put into a grow tower that waters itself. You just fill the water once a week, and then you clean it out once a year. You could have all your greens you need, inside your house. So, and then there's how many podcasts now, Rob? How many podcasts were there when I first did my first podcast in 2011? There were maybe a couple hundred podcasts, maybe I'm sure there may be 1,000, couple thousand, let's say. Now there's like millions of podcasts. So this is the new media, Their old media, it's going to become defunct. It's just a matter of time. But you're doing a great thing. You're also listening to your still small voice, which is why you're doing this creative endeavor called dig within, right? Are you digging it, people? So there's a lot of creative things each and every one of us can do, especially as time necessitates the need for such creative endeavors to unfold. We have that power in us to make it so.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I tried to do, was compile all of the things that I'd been reading. And one of the major ones obviously was Walter Russell's work, and how it connects to all of the things that was really helping me in my life. And where I got the name for this was from the meditation, Marcus Aurelius's meditations, which was dig within, there lies the wellspring of good, ever dig and it will ever flow. And again, it reinforces exactly what Walter's teaching is. And it was just one of those things that I kind of came across with when I started to understand this was, and I was wondering what you think about this in terms of if I'm maybe conceptualizing this in the right way. Maybe we've kind of hit on this too, but because God is the central, it's the fulcrum, it's the central point. And with nature being its, I guess, nature being that fulcrum, and the way that God essentially creates and has that balance. So you must create mentally. And what you're talking about, bringing the body forth, is the way that you, I guess, would honor that connection to source, connection to God, would be to bring those works into existence, which is to pair the mental action of prayer, intention, dream, passion, a goal, or I guess all capitals love, into the real world. But the way that we manifest that, because we're kind of locked into this physical plane, is through the action of bringing those bodies forth, because that's the way that we are trapped here in this physical plane. And I guess I don't know if there's really a question there. I'm just wondering if that conceptualization is something that I'm on the right track, or is that something that people can kind of understand clearly, like from the beginning of this conversation, which is the conceptualization of the God model is a very difficult one for people to understand, especially like, again, with all the baggage around that word. And is that something that people can kind of grasp onto and take forth?
Yeah, well, if God is mind and mind has one job, and that's to think, to come up with thoughts. Okay, so let's take the analogy of a light bulb over the head. I have an idea. Okay, let's just say, let's stick with the same theme for a podcast. I got two choices at that point. I can bring the podcast forth, or I can not bring it forth. And we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts in the human brain daily, according to some science studies. Which one are you going to hold? Right? So if you want to create the body, you have to do one thing. You have to act on the thought that came from the mind. And I think that's really the hardest part of this all. Excuse me a second. Holding the thought is perhaps the greatest challenge. And everybody has a good idea daily, probably 3 or 4 of them. Some people probably have hundreds of good ideas a day. The question comes down to, do they build a body for it? And that's really the challenge. And I think that is, in a way, honoring the sacred intention of the creative mind, is take it to its completion. You know, if you can take that mind idea, which is the light bulb, you have the concept, you can think it out. Okay, I need a microphone, I need a little mixer, I need a computer, I need to create a channel on Rumble, I need to do this, and I need my first guest, and then I need to email my first guest. Then I need to, you know, set the time, get a Zoom account, and then I hit the record button, then the guest comes on, then I edit the video, then I render it down, then I upload it, and bam, once you hit the upload and it's loaded to the net, you have met the completion of your light bulb. It lives before you as a crystallized, living, breathing entity of its own. But it has, you know, like the Mona Lisa, there you cannot find Leonardo da Vinci in the Mona Lisa. Leonardo da Vinci is divine. You could take pieces of paint off the Mona Lisa and look at them with an electron microscope, and you will not find Leonardo. I can take one of your podcasts and I can take 1 second out of it, and I could analyze its sound and frequency, but I will not find Rob Edward anywhere in that MP3. Okay, that's the difference between the creator and what is created. The creation is not the creator. The poet is not the poem. The symphony is not the composer. The painting is not the painter. And that's sort of the two universes we live in. One is mind, it's wholly mind. It is at 90 degrees to motion and always will be. It will always be all knowing, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. It will always be all powerful. And it will always be the field from which all effect of divided, polarized motions come from. And that is really the greatest way to explain it. But and one way to explain it that makes sense. In other words, yes, we have two universes that we can be aware of: the mind universe and the matter universe. But one causes the other, not the other way around. And simply being aware of the order of creation that makes the most sense and can give you the most the most help and the best tools with which to create. You know, that's again stuff I covered in Knowing the Creator 101, and that was all inspired by the incredible teachings of Walter and Leo Russell, which again are available at philosophy.org.
Yeah, again, those specific examples that you gave are the things that really unlocked it for me. That idea that you can't find the creator in the creation, because it's the same way. Because I was in the acting and entertainment industry for a long time, and it just hit me so clearly with that too, because no matter what character you write, whatever you bring into existence with a movie or film, any sort of creative endeavor, although that is your creation, you aren't just that creation. I think that's a great kind of analogy for that. And it's one of those difficult things to really explain to people, because I think a lot of people don't find themselves as very creative, right? There's no one of the kind of the great, I guess, digs that you can give to anyone who's creative is like, oh, I'm an actor and I'm a musician, whatever. It's, oh, okay, so you're a waiter or something like that, right? Like it's constantly downgrading
Right.
what the actual endeavor is. So it's again, it's knocking that kind of creation side out of you. But again, the way that you were brought into this world was a creation, it was a creative event. All of those different things. It didn't come from a very logical like breakdown of way things happened. It was like hopefully it was something that was passionate, something that really kind of, sparked that creative divine thing in you. So you are a creative being, thus you are able to make those creations. And I was wondering, with that and the idea that we're kind of locked into this physical plane, but hopefully people are seeing how mind is a huge aspect of that we're not really tapping into. How does that work with Walter's idea on, I guess we would say, the other side, or passing from the physical plane into potentially whatever's next? And how does that relate to, I guess, maybe your conceptualization of things like when people say soul or spirit and those kind of concepts?
Right. Well, mind is not the brain. Um, and, mind thinks through the brain, if you will. So in terms of, the physical body, one should not confuse the Russell teachings to say that, even though you're not your body should nonetheless be important to you. Okay. Because it's a reflection of your thinking. If a person eats chocolates and fast foods all day long, look at the movie Super Size Me. What happened to that guy after eating McDonald's for 30 days, right? He was about to die. Okay. So, excuse my French, but shit in equals shit out. And basically, if you're gonna have impure thoughts and impure actions follow those thoughts, then you're gonna end up with a horribly disfigured and sick body. And we're seeing that everywhere, you know. And so the ultimate thing is to get your mind right, to become aware of mind, first of all, as causal, and then to either use ideas that have been proven to work and adopt those in your own ways of thinking, which then act to become the body that you are, or create new ones. You can, I like that saying by Buckminster Fuller, we cannot beat the system by violently. You have to build a new system that makes the old one obsolete. And the way to do that is to come up with new ideas. And again, necessity creates the need. That is the mother, father for all invention. We are entering a period of time where invention is going to go off the charts, because people are going to, the times that we live in are necessitating new ideas in order for our survival to be achieved and to remain continuous. So we're going to see some really incredible things come out of the human race. It's times like these where, the manure of the human race is preparing the next generation of human flowers so that the fragrances of the finer perfumes and scents can come out of that manure to recreate civilization in ways that are going to be, more in line with nature, have more continuity. And there's so many incredible opportunities at our fingertips. And the body itself is a purposeful thing, and we should embrace it as such, and think the right things and do the right things, being aware of the mind as the source of it, but also listen to the body and what it says, because it does reflect to us things that we do wrong. If you fall off a tree branch when you're a kid because you lean too far to the left or right, that's informing you that your thinking wasn't exactly, in balance. So ultimately, this is a great period of time for us to learn and take part and note the many examples of imbalance that we're seeing, so that we can, they say that sometimes the best mistakes are the ones you observe and don't make yourself. So, when it comes to vaccines, when it comes to knowledge of eating healthy, and, there's a lot of things we can learn from each other. And a lot of really great minds out there are doing the work that is sharing those ideas with others. And I just say, stay the course, keep your mind focused on the prize, and, never discount your own creative spirit, because that spirit is, it's the greatest power in the universe, and it resides within you. And we all have access to that power. It's just very few people look inward or think inwardly, toward the soul. Most of them are spending their time thinking outwardly toward the senses, and that's where you get off the beaten path, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you saying the things about kind of manure and bringing forth some flowers that from that is you need the kind of pain, or you need the teacher, those kind of teachings, or some sort of, again, I guess, degenerative side of the polarity to then bring forth the regenerative side of the polarity too. And it just reminded me, as you're talking about this, is some of the things that we're knowing now about healthcare and everything regarding that. And it's even things like history now I'm looking at with the ideas of the World's Fairs of old, and just what kind of insanity lies within that, and everything like that. And realizing that, it just made me think back into the future again, of like all these cathedrals and the things that we were able to create back in the day, at a time when they say we were mostly peasants and all this kind of stuff. But you just look at the things that we cannot even build that now, with everything that we're apparently so civilized and so advanced with. We can't even reproduce those great, fantastic works of art. And it's just, I think there's something like that coming too, where we're sort of trying to tap into this sort of work that Walter was really kind of illuminating people with is, these are the ways of which those things were brought into creation itself. It was that pure creative energy to create beauty, and just for the sake of having that creative power.
There's a great documentary called Why Beauty Matters. If you want to really get an in-depth study and comparative research presentation on why beauty matters, check out that video. Roger Scranton, I believe. If the strip malls were to come to an end tomorrow, it wouldn't bother me one bit. What is there artistic in a strip mall, for God's sakes? So in some ways, this is a good thing that we're going through this time, because we did have an incredible Renaissance period of 400 or 500 years, topped with geniuses like Edison and Marconi and Tesla and Walter Russell and Rudolf Steiner and Reich. You could go on and on and on. There's this period of time from like 1850 to 1940 or 50, about 100-year period. I think that was the peak of human civilization. Romance was, considered to be in its greatest expression in humanity. The rhythmic balanced interchange, the love principle, and then it just seemed to go down, with the First World War. Unfortunately, humanity began to sink, and that's where the whole idea for this movement called the Twilight Club came from, which is the reason the University of Science and Philosophy exists, is because you had notaries like Mark Twain, Herbert Spencer, Edwin Markham, Walt Whitman, who got together and decided that they needed to address this coming fall of mankind. That industry and the Industrial Revolution was taking man and turning him into a cog in a machine in a factory, instead of a productive, artistic human being capable of expressing his divine nature and inner qualities. And that's what's so wonderful about the teachings offered at the University of Science and Philosophy, is that is what they teach: how to access the divine within you so that you can manifest divine creations on the planet Earth. And that is our purpose as human beings. And make no mistake about it, when we don't live a purposeful life, then purposelessness is what we get, and the strip mall is the result. So, I mean, if there's any example of crappy architecture, there it is, right there. The fast food restaurant, the same exact thing popping up every 5 miles on an exit on every interstate, is the same damn thing from one side of the country to the other. And not just that, it's the worst stuff you could put in your body.
Mm.
And everybody wonders why there's epidemic levels of sickness, you know. So ultimately, finding yourself, finding that deep inner purpose, your own divine awareness of your own divine nature and cause within you, and that all power is available to you at every moment, every second of every moment of every day, is a surefire way to get yourself off your butt and get into gear. You know, we have all the power in the world to be as productive or as lazy as we want to. Most of the people I know don't get up before 9 o'clock. And I'm one who's up by 3 almost every morning. And by the time they even get up, I've already put 6 hours of work in, you know, and then people go, man, you're doing a whole lot of stuff. How do you do it? I'm like, well, I get up earlier than you, you know, it's that simple. Get up earlier if you want to get more done. And, you know, go to sleep 9 o'clock. Some people can recharge after a few hours of sleep, where others don't recharge even with 10 or 12 hours of sleep. They're still not fully recharged. It comes down to desire, you know, where you're going to put your volume knob, at 1 or at 10. You know, genius is at the 10. That's why we call them geniuses. I'm on the road to genius. I'm not there yet. I'll don't know that I'll ever produce 64 tons of art and sculpture, but I'm certainly going to make my own little dent in the world through the recognition of that divine light within me, and never give up on it. Because it's with that light that I've been able to do all the things I've done, like, you know, get Walter Russell's artwork back out on display after 20 years in storage. And when you have an idea and you have the intention and recognition of the divine within you, the divinity itself will bring things to you to help you accomplish your goals. You know, this is one thing that the Russell teachings were so wonderful to encounter when it came to manifesting your own desires. The universe, okay, it has to meet you halfway. If you do the work, the universe will work. For every bit of work you do, the universe works to help you accomplish your goal. If you stop, the universe stops. But if you keep moving and keep working toward your goal, one shovel at a time, one $10 bill in a savings account at a time, eventually, you're going to get closer to your goal. And behold, there it will be, a body that stands before you, complete and divine in itself.
That was one of the quotes that I attached to so intensely, and what I put into my meditation and prayer practices, which is no longer asking for things, but asking for the work to meet me halfway, or to say, work with me while I find, or whatever the kind of verbiage is, right? But it kind of shifted me from, again, placing it outside of myself, as opposed to saying, I'm
Right.
going to work on this. Please help bring this to me as I work with this myself.
Yeah.
And I think
The goals are not out there, right? They're in here. And so when you work toward a goal, you're working internally to manifest. But yeah, it like you're saying, it's a wonderful thing to know that the universe has to meet you halfway, because then it doesn't make your effort futile, you know. And there is purpose in working with the universe. One of the greatest tips I'll leave you with, for sure, and for anybody in your audience and anybody out there listening to this, is that creating a dialogue with the divine within you is imperative. Learn to talk with it. And you can talk out loud, or you can talk internally, or you can just think words internally, or think in waves, whichever works for you. But learn to dialogue with that source of your divinity, because it will talk back. And that's what the still small voice is. They call it your conscience. Always let your conscience be your guide. And when you do that, you will not stray into unbalance. You know, balance will be your lot. It will be your gift for that effort and that recognition.
I love that. And especially what you were talking about just before that too, the idea that all of this is within you, and it's stuff that you, again, have to work for, but it'll all meet you halfway. And I just want to thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you're doing with getting this workout, because again, it helped me so much conceptualize what I needed to understand. And again, it really kind of solved that God model that I had in my head, where I went, I understand this all kind of makes sense, but it's not in the religious kind of sort of contained system, of which again is more outside of you than it is something that's internal. And I was just kind of wrapping up, saying that it's the issue I think that a lot of people have to a certain degree is, once you understand that there's rules to work within, then if you break those rules, those are direct confrontation of your actions, and there's a personal kind of accountability for that. Whereas in the current model that we're seeing, I think kind of play out its final death throes is when you do operate in the opposite model. This is kind of where we're at, right? And I'm wondering, just to kind of wrap up, like, is there anything in that kind of last little section there of the idea that to work within this means that if you don't, there are sort of, I guess, reactions to that action? And is there any framework of which people can maybe work within to, again, bring that creative spark back to people and to create what they want?
Well, certainly, I would say finding things that inspire you. I mentioned illumination. I think it's important for everyone to understand what illumination really is. Illumination, quite simply defined, is a form of inspiration. It's just more of a grand inspiration, if you will. But every inspiration that you have, if you follow it, you're going to get closer to that divinity. And divinity is something that all of us have. There's no middleman between it. There's no religious figure, no government, no movement, no group that can stand between it. It's a man or a woman's connection to their own source, their divinity within, their self, their true self, if you will. And that self communicates only wisdom. It is the fount of youth. It is the fount of wisdom. It is the source of knowing, and it is the source of all power. And if anybody, the wonderful thing about the Russell teachings is they're cult proof, 100% cult proof. And that's my term that I added to it some years ago, because how many things are cult-like in this world? And even the term occult, Dr. Russell said he'd like to drown the occult world. It has no existence. It's machinations of men's minds to worship demons and devils. And yeah, your mind is very powerful. You can create evil. You can create, devils and demons that chase you around your whole life, because your belief in that is the thing giving it power. And it will haunt you, and you will have to kneel before it and beg for forgiveness from it. If that's your imagination of what God is, something to beg for forgiveness from, then that's what it will be. And that's how you will have to serve it. So the mind is an extremely powerful thing. It is the most powerful thing. And we've been taught lie after lie about what it really is and how we can actually work with it. And in place of mind, you have governments, you have religions, you have employers, you have knowledge viruses, you have academia, you have medicine, you have all these externalisms trying to take that power and focus it away from an internal focus, which is really where the great library of creation exists. It's within you. That library is all knowledge, all purpose, and all presence, and it's within you directly and can be known by you directly. Again, there's no knowledge in a library. The knowledge is in the words that reflect off your knowing, which is inside of you already to begin with. So I think that's the cure. That's the white pill between the red pill and the blue one, which is divided. Pick the left side of the seesaw or the right, you're still on the fucking seesaw, right?
Yep.
So when you pick the white pill, which is the fulcrum, which doesn't move, again, take that piece of green magnetic paper, hold it over a magnet, and you'll see the location of the creative mind, that which unites polarities into one. Okay, prior to their division, that is the all creative force of divinity within us. And it's accessible to all of us based on our desire, and that's really the only difference between mediocrity and genius is that one desires to be a genius. What does mediocrity desire?
Mediocrity.
Not much.
Yeah.
So you want to make a dent in life and do some really great stuff. Listen to that still small voice, learn to dialogue with it, learn to listen to it, and then act to fulfill your desires. As Joan of Arc said, act and God will act.
Yeah, I love the quote too. Pray and move your feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Matt, I can't thank you enough for being here and taking the time. Where can people find your work, the work of Walter Russell, and connect with this work further if they choose to?
Yeah, that's easy. MattPresti.com, MattPresti.com is my personal website. You can find at the bottom of the page links to my Telegram, Rumble, YouTube while it's still there, and minds.com, I think I'm on. And then for everything Walter and Leo Russell, visit philosophy.org. And to order the home study course, Universal One, Secret of Light, all these really wonderful, just super extraordinary books. I'll just say that. Visit philosophy.org/store and get yourself a Russell book. Please don't buy from Amazon because the university has been banned from selling physical books on Amazon. I don't know why. They never gave us sufficient explanation other than we didn't meet some criteria with a valid tracking rate nonsense. So if you buy books on Amazon of the Russells, you're going to pay 10 times more than what you would if you got them from the university directly. So again, philosophy.org/store. And Mr. Edward, I thank you for having me on, and it's a pleasure. And maybe down the road we can do this again.
Absolutely. I would love that. Again, can't thank you more for your time. Yeah, try not, as much as you can, try to buy directly from people and not Amazon and whatnot. I highly recommend everyone
cut out the middlemen.
Exactly. And push towards the world that you want to live in and the world that you want to build. And I highly recommend everyone pick up the Universal One and the home study course for sure. I have the Secret of Light here too. I need to crack into that as well, but it's fantastic work and it's all empowering things. And it's all about your connection to what you want to create. And there's no middleman. It's all in your hands. So again, I can't thank you enough, Matt. We'll definitely get you back on if you're open to it. I love these conversations, and this is really the first one that I've dove into that's really more of these. I don't know if esoteric is the right word, but more of these spiritual concerns or proof of our connection to some sort of divine. So again, thank you. And everyone else, if you can just follow the links below in terms of how to get in contact with me and how to follow up the show. And please, if you have any comments or anything that you would want to see in the future, or people that you think I would resonate with, to bring them on and bring to you, that would be great for me. So again, everyone, thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Rob.